Well guys, I finally got the Durston X-mid Pro 2 Dyneema tent. I just unboxed it. I'm gonna go ahead and set it up for the very first time. I'm going on a hike tomorrow. I'll give you some reviews from the trail as well. Let's crack into it, let's take a look. Well guys, I just got the Durston pitched up with the 4 tent stake pitch. As you can see, I haven't been in it just yet, but this is a huge tent. I'm already blown away by the size comparison between this and the ZPacks Duplex. It is pretty astonishing how much larger this tent is than the one I'm used to. But you know, it pitched up, it did indeed pitch up pretty easy. Definitely pretty different than a duplex. But I would definitely, so far from the outside, it looks pretty good. And it did pitch relatively easy. Let's go ahead and get in and we'll take a look at it from the inside. All right guys, well, home sweet home for the time being. This is the inside of the Xmid, and boy, these angles definitely take a minute for me to kind of understand. It has certainly got some interesting geometry going on in here. Overall, it feels nice. I can definitely understand that this is probably best used as a one-person tent, just because I don't know how much it's gonna come out. But if you can see when I lay down over here on this side of the tent, I have quite a bit of headroom here. And if I were to lay instead over on the other side of the tent, all of a sudden that headroom is not so great. Although I'll mention, it really isn't the end of the world, this headroom, or lack of headroom. It's really not too terribly much worse than, honestly, it might even be just a little bit better than what I would get in the ZPacks Duplex when I didn't have the outriggers rigged up to hold up that sort of ceiling wall. So there are a few details in here that I think are pretty neat. For one, we have these little elastic bands right here, which are undoubtedly for tying up the doorway here. I'm sure we'd be able to tie that up and just kind of keep it up and out of the way if you were working in and out of the tent or coming in and out if there weren't too many bugs around or whatever. Another few details I definitely like. I love that the door opens up and away instead of down as in the duplex. The tent door was like a big rainbow door, and then when you opened it, you'd have to open, for one, you'd have to open the entire door, and then for two, it would just lay either on the ground, but either outside of the tent or inside of the tent, neither one of which are super ideal. But this is a much more smartly designed door, and as you can tell, that zipper just pulls closed so easily with one hand. Although I'll say that I did notice when I was opening up the vestibule doors that those did not open super well with one hand. Perhaps I had pitched it too tight. I'm not sure. This is literally the first time I've ever opened up this tent. So these are just the initial snap thoughts. Something to be aware of course, if you've been looking into this tent, if you've been reading about the Xmid Pro 2, you'll be aware undoubtedly that it does not have a Dyneema floor, unlike the duplex. This is some type of nylon floor, which I think helps it pack up a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller, excuse me, and also might save some weight. I'm not sure. It might be heavier. I don't know. I'm not one of the gram weenies necessarily, but yeah, something to be aware of is that floor is also, by the looks of it, super sheer. I don't know if you can see in the video, but with my naked eye, I can see the grass underneath of this tent very clearly. So as much as I'm sure it's probably a very rugged floor, I expect I'll be using a ground cover with this tent. Again, much like I did with the duplex, it's just an expensive piece of gear and I really don't want to damage it too much. A couple other really nifty things I'm seeing in here detail-wise is that these bathtub floors have small little stays that'll keep the bathtub up all the way around. As I got more and more familiar with my duplex, I felt very comfortable in my ability to pitch up the bathtub so that it would stay up. But fundamentally that is a bit of a thing in the duplex, is that the bathtub and the way it's situated against the tent ceiling, it can cause sometimes whatever condensation forms on the top of the tent to sort of roll off into the bathtub, which is not what you want. But this design certainly looks quite a bit smarter in that respect, and looks like it's actually really nice. Another thing I really like about this layout so far that I've noticed is that these vestibules are every bit as huge as I had heard. That is a massive vestibule, plenty large enough to keep a couple of packs probably out on each side. Not that you would ever need to keep 4 packs outside necessarily, a 2-person tent, but plenty large enough to do so if you were to feel so inclined or had some extra gear that you were trying to keep dry or out of the elements. Just a couple of quick drawbacks that I've noticed, although they don't really affect me, is that this tent does indeed come with no pockets whatsoever, no pockets, cubbies, anything like that. I know the Duplex did have, right on the side of each door, did have a couple of those little mesh pockets. I honestly just about never used them whatsoever, so for me that's no loss, but I could see how that might be a bit of a sticking point for some folks. So certainly you will have heard about how these vestibule flaps are actually secured up using a magnet up on the outside, and that is super handy just to be able to pull down the magnet toggle and get that vestibule flap to stay up or stay down, whichever suits whatever environment you're in right now. So yeah, you can just kind of pull that flap, pull your vestibule down, and you're good to go. Should also mention that on that exterior vestibule there are zipper pulls on both sides. So again, unlike the Duplex, it's going to be feels like it's going to be considerably easier to go ahead and seal it up when the weather does go south. And that is all sealed up. Once you do have that external vestibule sealed up, probably also worth noting these awesome little ventilation ports that this tent has. So this is again just that same little stick which is used in the bathtub floor to keep the bathtub floor up, sort of sewed in, bonded in, and then it has a little Velcro spot right here, and there's a matching Velcro spot up on the outside there. So if you want to get a little extra ventilation working through as you've got all of your vestibules closed up, you can just kind of kick out that little stick, and that should hold the vestibule door open while protecting you from any sort of moderate rain anyways. So I'll say, after laying in here for just a couple minutes, it is definitely pretty astonishing how much space I feel like I have in this tent. It is definitely longer, at least as pertains to a single sleeper occupying the tent. I definitely feel like I have a lot more space. And I should mention, I never really felt cramped in the ZPacks Duplex, but this tent is just spectacularly spacious. Plenty of space to sit up very easily. I'm 5'11", and there's whatever that is, maybe 8 inches of space, maybe 6 inches of space above my head. And honestly, it just kind of feels like the way that the angles work against one another, with one another I should say, it just feels like it's going to be much easier to actually like sit up and lay down in this tent as well, without running the risk of knocking into any of the tent walls, ceiling walls, as was the case in the Duplex. All right, guys, well, there's the initial sort of thoughts after the very first unboxing and pitching of my Durston X-mid Pro 2. And honestly, after the initial pitch, the initial maiden voyage into the tent itself, I feel pretty good. I'm still pretty excited about this tent. Definitely eager to get on trail tomorrow and see how it feels in the pack, see how it pitches up in a more rugged environment. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up for right now, and I will see you tomorrow over at the Cranberry Wilderness. All right, hello again, guys. It is 1:18 in the afternoon on the second day of 2023. It is just about 61.2 degrees, and I have made it to the Middle Fork Williams River trailhead here in the Monongahela National Forest. This is a forest system which I've visited before, but it is not a part of the forest system which I have visited before. This is indeed the Cranberry Wilderness. I had read somewhere on a forum or something that this is the largest wilderness area in the East, and it is indeed very far from the largest wilderness area in the East. That superlative piqued my interest, and I did a little bit of research and found that there are indeed 3 wilderness areas east of the Mississippi in the United States, which are considerably larger than this one. One in Georgia, one in Florida, and one in Virginia. My home park of Shenandoah indeed has a wilderness area considerably larger than this one. But yeah, I am excited to be here. This is already a beautiful spot. This classifies as highlands for the east in the US. And it does look a little bit like Rhone. And man, there are just trails everywhere. Let me figure out where in the world I'm going. I'm gonna get hiking. And again, sort of the main purpose of this hike here is just to test out the Xmid Pro 2, which I've just received. So this will be my first night sleeping in that tent once I find a good place to camp up. But I only have probably about 2.5, 3 hours of sunlight left before it starts to get dark. And so I'm gonna go ahead and see how far down trail I can go before I have to start looking for a place to pitch up, and then we'll find home for the night and take a look at that tent. So we'll get hiking, and I'll talk to you guys later. It is 4:26 and 51.6 degrees. I've made it to what I'm gonna call home for the night. This is right in between Slade Branch and Slick Rock Run. Slick Rock Run, right here on what I think is the West Branch. Yeah, waterway. Looks like an established campsite here. I'm not really gonna waste too much time because again, we only just passed like the winter solstice just a couple weeks ago or something, so it is getting dark pretty early right now. Again, it's only January 2nd today, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this tent of mine pitched up. This is the Williams River, excuse me. So I'm right here on the north bank of the Williams River, in between Slick Rock Run and Slade Branch. So yeah, I think this is probably the spot that I'm looking at. I know that this new tent, this Durston X-mid Pro 2, has a larger footprint than I am used to with my ZPacks Duplex. So I am kind of keeping that in mind as I scout out a spot. I'm also expecting just a little bit of rain tonight, nothing too crazy, just a little bit of rain. So I also mentioned earlier yesterday that that floor of that tent just looks a little feeble. So I have ordered a Durston footprint to go under it, but I don't have that yet. They don't have them ready yet. So I am instead using just my Dyneema ZPacks footprint for my duplex. But, you know, it won't fit perfectly, but it'll be totally fine, I'm sure. So anyways, let's go ahead and get this tent pitched up and I'll check back again. All right, well, certainly that is far from my favorite pitch, but I think it's gonna have to do tonight. You could see, probably noticed that I moved from my initial spot to this second spot. That first spot was just way too off level. There's just the four corner points of the tent were gonna be at different sort of heights, different elevations, and it didn't seem like that was gonna work, at least not with my rather lacking level of familiarity thus far with this tent. So I know that like on that sort of wonky different height points I can pitch my duplex, but I'm just not familiar enough with this tent, and frankly I'm not even certain if this tent, even given a higher level of familiarity with it, is able to accommodate such different height points. So this spot just looked a little broader, a little flatter overall, so I went ahead and pitched it here. And as you can see, even still, these two top points are just not quite as stable as I would like. I think it's going to be fine in this environment. I mean, I'm in the east and there's plenty of trees around, so it's not like I'm not really expecting any sort of super heavy winds to be coming through, brutalizing my tent or me as I sleep or anything. And even the rain, which is forecast, isn't forecast to be too terribly intense. So I think it just is what it is for tonight, and this is definitely something I'm gonna have to get more familiar with, because frankly, I don't expect that I'll be pitching this tent on soccer fields in perpetuity as I did in the previous pitch. And honestly, even this terrain right here is pretty darn good as trailside tent sites go. So, you know, I'm just gonna have to get more familiar with pitching this tent in imperfect conditions, because you know, I'm not super happy with this pitch, and I want to be much more familiar with this tent. So anyways, I will get my bunk and stuff all squared away in there and check back in just another minute. All right, so I've got my bunk all squared away inside. We can give that a quick look. I will say just another couple of notes as I've been actually using this tent this time. I do really like how the vestibule sort of pins up with this magnet, although I definitely wonder and I'm kind of curious to see exactly how strong this magnet winds up being in the case of wind or weather or anything else. I mean, it's convenient for right now, but we'll see how strong it winds up being. Another thing I really like is this door. It was way easier to set up with this door that kind of flops open. I did use these little elastic ties just to kind of pin it back as I was working inside the tent. It's also huge to have the trekking pole way off on the side instead of the duplex, where the trekking pole, the sort of vertical support for the tent, is right in the middle. I was able to tighten up this peak just a little bit by securing some of the guy lines, although just here as I jostled the peak, you can see just even that little bit of force was enough to knock down this magnet on the fly here. So again, I'm kind of wondering how strong this magnet is going to wind up being, because if it isn't me jostling a trekking pole, I certainly can imagine no shortage of scenarios in which the wind would be adequate to jostle that trekking pole in the peak of the tent enough to rattle down that magnet. I think, oh gosh, see, and this fly I had pinned up and now it's down as well. So I don't know if that magnet is as cool as it is. I'm not sure if it really is going to serve its function as intended. I did pin back these doors here, just the sort of angle on the vestibule, using one extra tent stake on each side. So that means now I have the four corners of the tent plus each of the vestibules pinned down for a total of 6 tent stakes in use in this pitch. And we'll kind of see how we go. I'm kind of curious to see how well the tent is able to protect me from rain when it's pitched this way. So I may wind up getting some spray. If the rain starts coming down a little heavier, the wind kicks up or something, definitely I'll wind up kind of closing up these vestibule flaps. But you know, I mean, it's a learning process still, so we'll kind of see how we go. But it is definitely getting dark, so this will probably be my final check-in. I'll go ahead and move some distance off from camp and cook up some dinner. I did bring some Mountain House lasagna and meat sauce tonight, so a little bit of a luxurious dinner for me. No ramen tonight. I didn't mention about this Cranberry Wilderness that this is also a black bear sanctuary or something like that. Black bear conservation area, I think, is its official designation. So I want to just, you know, I'm not super concerned about it or anything like that. Clearly I'm out here on my own, but I do just want to be mindful of that and kind of make it easy for the bears to ignore me. So I will cook dinner far off from camp. I did bring my earth sack for this hike, and so I'll rig this up to a tree closer to where I eat, and you know, and then just bunk up for the night. So we'll see how my night goes, and I will talk to you guys in the morning.
Guys, 7:29 in the morning, and it's rained a little bit. That's all right. It's still raining a little bit. I'm gonna wake up.
Good morning, folks. It is 8:31 in the morning and, excuse me, 45.6 degrees. Just woke up, well, just breaking camp, I should say. Slept pretty good last night. I definitely turned in like way too early, man. I'm not used to trying to go to sleep that early. Like that was even early by like hiking standards. Trying to turn in like at 5 o'clock or whatever it was, 5:30. So, you know, took a little while to get to sleep, but then slept all right. And I mentioned that it rained some last night. It was just kind of passing clouds. It wasn't ever anything really heavy. The heaviest it got, I'd say it would be like a steady light rain. But for the most part, it was just kind of like passing drizzles, excuse me, that would kind of blow through. I did wind up closing one flap just to kind of see how that would go. I'll say a few thoughts on the tent. So the one flap, as I lay on my back, the flap that was on my right side, I had pinned that up while I was outside the tent. So the vestibule flap was rolled sort of outward away from the tent and then pinned up. Whereas the one which was on the opposite side of the tent, on the left side, if you will, of the tent, I had rolled that one up while I was inside of the tent. So the flap was rolled inwards towards the inside of the tent. Sorry, I didn't start my Gaia. And I was just kind of curious to see how that would play out, whether that would make much of any difference at all. And I think it did make a couple of differences, but I can't say conclusively off of just one test. What I noticed though is that the tent on my left side, that is, or the flap on my left side, that is the flap which was rolled up from the inside of the tent and rolled inward, that flap seemed more steady with that magnetic attachment. I think that the magnet held better when the flap was rolled inward. The one on the opposite side, I think, held less well with the flap rolled outward. However, in that rain, I will say that the tent flap rolled outward, the one on my right side, that one I think did a better job of keeping the rain out. I didn't get a ton of rain in the tent. Again, it was not a very heavy rain at any point, but I do think that the flap on my right side that was rolled outward, sort of in being rolled away from the tent, when it was finally pinned up, when I pinned it up, it wound up forming or creating like a little rain gutter, or like an alley for that rain to kind of dribble down and then roll down the back corner of the tent. So the bummer is that one isn't, in this limited experience, one isn't categorically better than the other, one flap rolling method. But you know, I'll learn as we go and kind of keep noting differences as I observe them. A couple other thoughts about the tent. One thing I didn't mention when I pitched it for the first time a couple days ago, and something that I think is a bit of a bummer, is that it has no points. So I mentioned that it has no pockets on the inside. Now I don't really care about that. I don't really use pockets. I don't care about them. I don't need them. I don't want them. I don't care. But my ZPacks Duplex has two really cool little loops secured up into the very top, like, apex of the tent, one on each side. And what I and a lot of other hikers do is just run a line between those 2 points along the sort of top seam of the ZPacks Duplex, thus creating just a little like hanging wire or drying line or clothesline, whatever you want to call it. And the Durston X-mid Pro 2 has no such points, which I think is a bummer, is a bit of an oversight in the design, because especially, I mean, like last night, for example, I forded this Williams River almost immediately before getting to camp, and so my socks and shoes were totally soaked, and that's fine, but I would have really preferred to have pulled off my socks and hung them up on a line rather than just balling them into a wet little pile on the floor of the tent, which is what I wound up doing. So I really wish that there was a couple little points at which to hang a clothesline in that tent. A couple other things I'll mention about the tent. Those zippers are great, really, really cool. On a positive note, when I did close up that left flap, I did close up that flap once the rain picked up a little bit, and I felt that there was some rain getting in from that flap. I just unzipped the screen, reached out, popped down the magnet, and then zipped down the weatherproof zipper, which closes up the vestibule on that left side. And all of that was super easy to do while very groggy, and very easy to do with just one hand. So that's a huge improvement over, I hate to say it, I love my duplex, but that's a huge improvement over the duplex. Just being able to like make yourself weather worthy that easily is definitely pretty cool. The duplex, it takes a lot more work to kind of transition from all your flaps pinned up to all your flaps pinned down. It's just a lot more steps, and most of them require two hands. But this one, wicked easy, wicked easy, and super cool. I'm one of the few who has a ZPacks Duplex in camo, which I think is a heavier weight Dyneema, and certainly a darker Dyneema than this Xmid Pro 2. So I definitely noticed I was getting a lot more light in the tent. It was a lot brighter in the tent than I had really found my duplex to be at any point. Doesn't really matter a whole lot, but you know, just kind of something I noticed, so something I'll mention. With that, I think I'm just gonna get to moseying here. I think I don't really know how far I'm gonna go. I mean, I'm gonna go back to the car today, but not really sure which, oh my goodness, which path I'm gonna take to get there. And yeah, anyways, we'll get going. Might be 18 miles, might be 14 miles. I don't really know, whatever it is, it'll be. So I'll get hiking. If I think of any notes about the tent, I'll snap back on. Meanwhile, good morning, happy third day of the year. Alright guys, 1:33 p.m. Just making it almost back to the car here. Pretty good hike. Man, I'll tell you, this Cranberry Wilderness, well, let me back up. I'll tell you, I'm out of shape, man. So this was my first time out on a trail since finishing the Continental Divide Trail. And that means it's been, what, 5 months or something like that? Like, it's been a while. 4 or 5 months, I don't even know. And man, it's like the unfortunate truth of human existence that the body stores fat but does not store muscle. What a bummer. Well, 100% out of shape. That trail totally kicked my butt, and it should not have. It was not that challenging, and it was pretty. It was pretty. I'll say that I noticed when I first got on this trail, I was talking about how it reminded me quite a bit of the Rhone Highlands. That was really only at the high elevation of this trail. Really, for the most part, it did not look at all like the Rhone Highlands. It looked more just like sort of standard mid-Atlantic woods, which isn't to say it was unpleasant. Certainly it was pleasant, but don't come out here expecting it to look all like the Rhone Highlands, because it's only the very tippy tops of these mountains that look like that. I'll also say that, boy, that north-south trail, which is the trail I took to get back to the car here, it was total slop. It didn't even rain that much last night, but it was total slop. Like, the last 3 miles or so was just mushy slop, sometimes ankle deep, just trudging through mud, which again, whatever, doesn't really bother me, but just to sort of have an idea of what you're getting into if you come out here. Another couple thoughts about the tent that I neglected to mention earlier. I was very impressed with the size of the stuff sack. I know this sounds like a strange thing. I don't use the stuff sack for my ZPacks Duplex. And honestly, one of the main reasons I don't use the stuff sack for my ZPacks Duplex is that I ripped it. Like, one of the first times I tried to put the tent back into it, that stuff sack I found to be just like the exact right size to fit the tent, which meant in any sort of less than ideal situation, the tent just wasn't going to fit gracefully at all. So, well, I ripped that stuff sack and I don't use it anymore. I haven't used it for years. Pretty much, I haven't used it since before I got on the AT. well, I guess 2 years ago now in 2021. But the stuff sack for the Xmid Pro 2 was really, really nice. Just the right size. It wasn't floppy, it wasn't loose, it wasn't like overboard huge, but it was just the right size so that even, you know, in that sort of less than perfect situation this morning of like wetness and mud and stuff like that, I was still able to pack it up, roll it up, and just sort of smash it in there without much difficulty. Although to that point, I will say another difference between the Xmid and the Xmid Pro 2 and the Duplex is those little stays that sort of keep the bathtub floor up, and those little stays which you can use to kick open those little like window vents in the tent. You know, you don't want to just smash that tent closed and smash it into the bag. You want to, you know, kind of take an extra second with it because, you know, I'm just terrified of one of those stays poking through the tent because they are rigid little poles, maybe whatever 4 inches tall or so each. So you do have rigid material that you're packing into that stuff sack when you're packing up that tent. Anyways, I think that's all I have for this very first camp in the tent. I definitely plan on having this out much more over the next few months because I just got to get more familiar with it. I really, really want to get more familiar with it. So if you're interested in following along that little journey of getting familiar with the Xmid Pro 2, definitely be sure to hit like, hit subscribe, all that. Drop a comment if you have the tent, if you're curious about getting it, if you're interested in hiking, if you've been to Cranberry Wilderness, whatever. Definitely love to hear from you. So hit like, hit subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. I am going to take off my soaking wet shoes and socks and start the 4.5-hour drive home now. I will see you next time. Hey, just a final note here before I pull away. If you're interested in seeing an exact track of the hike I just got back from, definitely be sure to check out the description down below. I have a link to my Gaia GPS track for that hike, so you can see the exact trails, the exact elevation shift and all that. So check out the Gaia link down below. And again, leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching.